How's it going today, people? No, I haven't shot a video like this in a little bit, but I wanted to do one today, February the 13th, 2023. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that dominates the media most of the time, and that is the ugly R word, racism. Now, my definition of the word is the same definition that was in the Webster Dictionary for around about 40 years, and that would be the definition of racism. The definition of racism is the belief that your particular ethnic group is superior to all others. That's all that it entails. The only thing you need to do to be racist is believe that your ethnic group is superior to all others. That's all it's required. Power and all this other weird stuff that they've added to it is not. That's something else. Bigotry, prejudice, whatever. It's not racism. The reason that I hold that definition to be true is because I lived it firsthand. Well, let me explain. I understand you say, hey, you're a white man, what could you possibly know about it? Well, let me offer you this. Now, racism really wasn't an issue in my life as far as I can remember until I was about 7 years old. Now, like everybody else, we had a TV and everything, so we were aware that there were different people around the world that looked different than us, and so I was aware. But I didn't understand the whole hate aspect of it all until I was about 7 years old. It was my first real memory that I can remember that sticks out. And I had come to live with my grandparents with my mom, and I was out back helping her get clothes down off the clothesline. And I looked up at our next door neighbor's window and I saw a rebel flag flying in the window. And a couple thoughts popped in my head. The first one was, oh, cool, he must have won that at a carnival or something because it's the only place I've ever seen one. And the second thought was, oh, I think I want one of those. And so I pointed up at it and I said, I want one of those. And my mom looked up and she said, oh, hell no. And she then added, your grandfather would paddle your ass. Tried to hang that in this house. I had no idea why. I thought it represented the General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard. I was like, what the hell is the problem with the Dukes of Hazzard? Man, we watch it on TV. I didn't understand, but I would soon learn what that meant to some people. I don't know how long I'd lived there, but not long after we moved in, another little boy about my age moved in next door. About the same way I came to live with my grandparents, and his name was Chris. So we started hanging out, and I showed him all around the neighborhood and showed him where we build forts and all that kind of stuff. We rode bikes all around. One day, probably maybe a month or two into hanging out with him, his aunt invited all of us to go swim at the lake. So we spent the whole day at the lake, came back, probably, I want to say 1 to 2 days later, I'm eating dinner, and I look out the dining room window and I see my friend Gary talking to Chris. So I hurry up and eat my dinner and I run out there, see what they're talking about. And when I get out there, Gary's basically giving Chris shit for his sunburn, which was really bad. Chris was a platinum blonde, freckle-faced kid, really light complected, didn't tan at all, turned to a lobster boy. And so Gary was fucking with him about it. And so Chris looks to Gary and he says, well, how come you don't burn? And Gary says, well, I have Blackfoot Indian in my family. And without missing a beat, Chris looked right at him and said, oh, so you're a half-breed then? Gary and I looked at each other and we were like, you mean like a dog? Because that's the only time I've ever heard that term. And he said, no, because you have American Indian in you. And I was like, well, I have Chippewa and Cree Indian in me. I was thinking to myself, am I half-breed too? Chris didn't say anything, he just rode away. And it wasn't very long after that day that we started having some real problems with those next door neighbors. It got to be so that just about every warm weekend, we had an issue with him, and many times the cops had to be called out to calm things down. There was fights, all kinds of stuff. We had problems with him probably every warm weekend after that for years. I could tell you a lot of stories, but one in particular, incident in particular, we were having a family reunion, and it had gotten kind of late into the day, and I had a group of family that was out front drinking and talking and just having a good time. Nobody was doing anything. And here comes Big John around the hedgerow. He doesn't have a shirt on, no shoes, he's drunk as fuck and carrying a switchblade. So he's tapping it on the road, trying to get somebody to come out there and fight him for my family, and nobody will. And so he calls out my stepdad and tries to get him to come out there and fight him. Well, my mom heard that, so she walked into the street and broke a bottle and threatened to cut his balls off should he step a foot in the yard, and that, you know, she wanted a piece of his man, he was gonna have to go through her. But anyway, this brings everybody out into the street. My family, their family, everybody's in the street, kind of nose to nose, going at it. Not fighting, but just getting loud and about to fight. And I guess it might have been well, I won't really say a stroke of luck, but for some reason, the cops just showed up spontaneously, really quick, too. I was surprised. Maybe they just anticipated problems. Maybe the neighbor saw the beginning of it and called right away. I don't know. But they were there pretty quick. And so no physical stuff happened at the start. Well, a few minutes into this, as we're all standing around, and the cops are all there, this fucking kid, who was probably about 15 or 16 at the time, his name's Wyatt, comes up to my grandmother, exposes himself, and then spits in her face. She has to take her glasses off and clean, wipe it off, everything. And the only thing the fucking cops did, who witnessed this, was stop my grandfather from beating the shit out of him. They threatened to take him to jail if there was any more problems. I'm not kidding you. I have no fucking idea why they didn't haul his little ass to jail, at least rough him up a little bit after spitting in a senior citizen's face. But, I mean, happened right in their view. They saw it and did nothing. I can't explain it to you, but that was really what happened. So we had problems with him every fucking warm weekend. We had issues with him, and that went on for a number of years, probably till I was about 12 years old. Then they moved in, and we also moved, and we moved to South Lyon. And like Brighton at the time, South Lyon was a homogenous, if you will, group of people. Almost all of them were white, or at least of European descent. A lot of Polish in South Lyon at that time. But to explain the difference in, most of the kids that I was in class with had enough money that one pair of their jeans cost more than my entire wardrobe, everything I bought for school that year. I had about maybe $100 to spend on everything. That's, shoes and pants and everything. So I could usually afford one get up, one outfit. So we were definitely living in two different worlds, me and most of the kids there. And so I got bullied for that. But then my brother decided to make friends with the only kid of mixed ethnicity in the whole fucking school district, as far as I knew. In the high school and the middle school at least. This guy named Vincent. I'm guessing that my brother and him, started talking to each other because they had a lot of the similar interests, like horror movies and that kind of thing. Vincent liked heavy metal and that kind of stuff. He was, for all intent and purpose, he was, acted like a white kid, if you will. But nevertheless, he got fucked with quite a bit. So did I. I was at the middle school, and I can't even tell you the things that they used to call me in gym class. Like Ninja Lips and Ninja Lover, Jungle Bunny, all kinds of shit. That's what they said to me. I can't imagine what the fuck they told my brother. I can tell you that one day, because the middle school got picked up first, and then they went and picked up the high schoolers. One day we got to the high school, my brother got on a bus and his face was beat red. He was having a hard time breathing. He's asthmatic. I didn't know what fucking happened to him. He's looking pretty rough. He wouldn't tell me. Well, Vincent told me. apparently the starting linebacker for the varsity football team came up and asked my brother what the capital Taiwan was. My brother didn't hear him because he was busy talking to Vincent. He said, "What?" And the guy said, "Bangkok," and he punched him as hard as he could, my brother, in the crotch. And that my brother is not some tough guy or anything like that. He was just sort of like a, you know, wanted to be prep nerd type kid. Not a tough guy at all. They were just doing it to be assholes, and they did that shit right in front of the principal of the high school and the varsity football coach, and they did nothing about it. I was harassed constantly, and they did nothing about it. I think that had more to do with our economic status, but befriending and hanging out with the only mixed ethnicity kid in the whole school, it didn't help matters either. Come to find out, after Vincent's second visit to our house, my mom talked to him for a little bit, asked him what his mom's name was, and Vincent, it turned out that Vincent was our third cousin removed, or whatever, however you want to say it. His mom and my mom were cousins, so he was blood. It was kind of crazy. So we hung out with him, but for the first 14 years of my life in a all-white community, I was not white enough. Then, due to life changes and the way things go for kids like me growing up, I went to live with my dad in Lansing, and this was a culture shock. Complete different. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I talked country, I looked country, just stuck out like a sore thumb. And the nail that stands up is the one that gets pounded down. And don't you know, I got fucking jumped a few times based on the color of my skin. It didn't help that I was walking alone in the wrong neighborhood, but I got jumped because I was white, and the things that were said to me were, racist, if you will, in the today's vernacular. The dig back then was to call white boys white bread, and I heard that every day, pretty much. I went to Gardner Middle School. So first 14 years of my life, not white enough. The rest of my life since then, I'm too white. I don't understand it. Doesn't make any sense to me. This much I can promise you. If you could remove race from the equation, so-called race, what most people equate to color of skin, and say you could snap your fingers tomorrow and make everybody the exact same color, the very next day, people would want to separate on length of hair, curliness, straightness of hair, eye color, weight, height, whatever you want. People that think like that will find another reason to separate. It doesn't matter. The color of skin is trivial to them. That doesn't matter. They'll find another reason. The whole idea of race, which is just a fucking idea in your head, makes no sense to me anyway. I mean, why would you be proud of something that you had nothing to do with? Your parents decided your race, not you. Are you going to be proud of something somebody else did? Pathetic. The whole idea of having pride in a group, are you willing to, take on everything that whole group does? I wouldn't want to be blamed for everything a so-called white person does. The fucking president of the United States comes on TV and tells a nation that the greatest threat to America right now is white supremacy. Give me a fucking break. There's no unity in the white race. There's no unity in any race. You know what the greatest threat to the life of a black man is? Another black man. Look it up. There's no unity. I mean, there are groups that have in-group preference and that kind of thing, but it would make as much sense to hate people over eye color as skin color. It really would. That might sound ridiculous to you, but it might come down to that one day. Anybody pushing the race stuff is just trying to fucking sell you something. The very same people who promoted and pushed the KKK in the early days of America are the ones behind Black Lives Matter and all this other racial division. What do they call that? Subcategories, whatever you call it, intersectionality. All that shit is born out of the Frankfurt School in Germany. It all comes from the same thing. It's cultural Marxism. If you're a member of the BIPOC community, you might want to check out what cultural Marxism has in store for you. But anyway, I'll just leave you with this. It's Ephesians 6:12, I think it is. I'll put it up on the screen. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I hope that made you think. Have a good day.